All right, welcome back to Getting Past the Premium, everybody, and we are here live again. Cam, thanks for joining us. So today with me we have, so I think everybody knows we run a risk management insurance firm by day. You know, I'm just a podcast host by night. And Cameron Carlow is our Chief Marketing Officer at Ellerbrock-Norris. And so we wanted to jump on today to connect back to some of the conversation that we had with Brett Young and go deeper on that marketing track.
Yeah.
But before we dive in there, give everybody a little bit of just your background, where you've been, how you got here, and then we'll kind of dive into how you view marketing in the insurance industry, risk management industry.
Yeah. Well, that's a fascinating topic. I love talking. I love talking marketing, but especially in the insurance industry, it gets to be awesome. But yeah. Cameron Carlow, let's see, I've been with you guys for almost a year now.
Yeah, that's
a couple months away. Yeah.
Yeah,
we've gotten a lot done though.
Yeah.
And then let's see, before that, I came up through journalism. So I was a sports reporter, sports journalist, kind of out of college, and those are the fun times. And then it's like, working nights and weekends every week. Well, right after we got engaged, it's like, I should probably spend more time with my wife. So then I went to the marketing world.
You're saying Paige didn't like you away nights and weekends and everything, yeah?
She was actually really cool with it. It was more of like my decision. But yeah, I moved into corp comms, marketing. I came up through financial services the last, 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
Which those two play really nicely together, right? That it gives you a good base coming in here to be able to look at everything we're doing and say, this was the tweak we put on it in financial services, but it's the same as it is in the insurance industry over here. So especially being a holistic firm like we are, and and even the tech side of it with launch, the stuff that we're doing there, a lot of that stuff overlaps with what I was doing before. So it's been a great experience, and it's having a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So one of the things that Brett and I talked about in the last episode quite a bit, or it may have come across, is like marketing is a broad topic, right? And it depends on your sales process, your ideal client, where you're at in your journey as a firm, a lot of things that go into what and how you should market, and then how does that lead to sales. But I also want to be cognizant that marketing in the insurance industry has evolved over time.
Yeah.
I think, where it used to be like put a billboard up and, then get out and cold call and talk to people and whatever. So I'm curious to get your perspective at a very high level there. Like, where do you see the state of marketing in our industry? And how do you see that moving forward? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the answer changes, right? Depending on what type of firm you're talking to, depending on how large of the firm. Getting into this industry, one of the things that really excited me, one of my mentors from before this, he always said, man, insurance industry, they get to have the most fun with advertising and marketing. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, think about it. Think of all the commercials you can remember right now, the goofiest, the weirdest ones out there.
That is true.
Your geckos, your emus, all that stuff running around. Man, yeah. And, the reason for that is when it comes to insurance, the number one thing on your mind is being top of mind when someone needs to make that decision to move. When they're ready to buy insurance for the first time, when they're ready to buy insurance down the road because they want to make a change, it's all about that brand awareness piece, right?
Yep.
So I couldn't even tell you who necessarily that emu one is from, right? I mean, I could, but I remember, this. And then you go to Google and you find it, right? Yeah. It's about being top of mind. And I think one of the points that you and Brett were making last week that I just kept nodding my head to was, everybody in your firm plays a piece in that.
Yeah.
If you're a risk advisor or insurance agent, you are just as much responsible for the brand reputation and growing your brand as anyone else, because so much of it, especially at a smaller firm, is going to be word of mouth and referral and just making sure people know who you are.
Yeah.
So like you said, it might have just been put up a billboard, which might be great if you're in a smaller town and you want people to see you for the first time.
Yep.
On the large scale, it's like, no, we need to buy a Super Bowl commercial with the craziest people possible and get all these famous people in there. Someone needs to remember our ad for when it comes time to make that decision. So when I talk about marketing, it's always the job of a marketer is to be upfront before any conversation ever happens with someone. So my job is to have them recognize our name at Ellerbrock-Norris before the sales team has a chance to talk to them.
Yep.
Or when they're ready to make a decision, they're going to go to our website because they've heard of us. They've thought highly of us based on our marketing and our advertising. Then they're going to come to us. So that's where the state of the industry, the state of marketing in general, I'd say is brand awareness first, sales second in my mind, especially as we see the more online transactions, things growing with SEO, and such just everything's on your pocket, right? You're taking your phone out and you're just going to look up business insurance near me, right?
Yeah. Well, so that brings up an interesting question from me. Like, there is a lot of marketing and advertising dollars that go into or come from the insurance industry, from the big players, right? And we all know them, as you mentioned. So, how do especially a smaller, agency or somebody starting out or whatever, how do I compete with that? Like, I think a lot of people just think that they can't compete, so they don't really do much of anything from a marketing or branding perspective, because they view it as a losing proposition. But it's a crowded space. So how do I stand out from a marketing perspective against all of those big brands that tend to try to dominate the ad space?
And nationally, they're probably going to dominate.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think people know what they're getting into with that. If your value prop as an agency, as a firm, is different than that, right? They're looking for mass. They want those little, go online, just fill out this form, boom, you have insurance, tons of transactions, not really high service. So if your value prop is high service and high touch point, and not necessarily spending a ton of time on it, but actually sitting down with someone and understanding their needs before you make those decisions, well, that's your value prop. And then the next question is, where's your audience? How do you get in front of them? So if you're local, it's looking at where your audience overlaps. Like Ellerbrock-Norris, great example. We serve a lot of business owners. Yep. That's our target market is local business. And I say local, not small. Yep. I always like to just point that out. Local businesses.
Relative.
Yes. So who are facing a lot of the same problems. And a lot of them, they have overlapping needs and what ends up being overlapping interests. So we're going to look at, whether it's a local sports team for you that you're sponsoring, or maybe it is a billboard. Maybe it's, hey, here's these two big commercial parts of our city where we know these businesses over are. Maybe you're putting a billboard up there. It's where can you just stay top of mind all the time. Other side of that comes like digital ads. And I know that can get a little bit advanced and a little scary for people, but there's so much opportunity there with targeting to hit that market exactly where you want to hit them. And for us being in Omaha, I can tell you this, if somebody's typing business insurance Omaha into Google, it's a lot different than someone typing business insurance and hitting enter, right? Yeah. So how do you own those local keywords, those local type searches versus the national ones to make sure you're hitting your target audience, and you're facing way less competition, but getting all the traffic from it?
Yeah. So I think first step, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is the first step saying, who do I want to serve? Right, because I think that's important of saying, what's my ideal client, my target market. I'm not saying necessarily niche focused. I think the more better you can niche, the better off you're probably going to be in the long term. But you don't have to get super focused, especially from the start. You can, like you mentioned, business owners in the local community. Those are types of things that you can narrow that down a little bit, and then ultimately saying, what problems do they have that I can solve? Right? Yeah. And then shout that from the rooftops.
Yeah.
But again, I guess, how do you look through that lens of, I only have a certain amount of time, I only have a certain amount of dollars in particular. Mm-hmm. How do I think about where to allocate those most effectively? Once I've kind of got my target market, I got to understand what's my highest ROI to get in front of them.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, a common answer there is to run to social media and just start posting like crazy. And, hey, look, it's free, right? Yeah. And hey, social media can be huge, especially I think social media from an individual perspective, if you're out there and you're sharing things on LinkedIn and Twitter, building your personal brand more so. People interact with people on social media. They don't interact as much with brands. And that's been a huge shift the last 5 to 10 years in the digital space that I don't think people are quite catching up to. The other side of that, though, is when you're looking at social media, it's a great way to engage employees and a great way to show up for recruiting, things like that. So anyway, to say what's the cheapest option isn't always the best option. What your main goal is, and I always say this here, put $1 in and get $2 out, right? Yep. You want to be able to find that ratio of I'm willing to spend money here if it's being fruitful. You're not going to do that unless you start testing things. So time and effort, yes. I mean, we have a full-time marketing person here. You might not have that as a smaller agency. Yeah. And so when you're working with that type of stuff, I would say start very small, and that's try to learn SEO a little bit. That can be a daunting thing, but search engine optimization, that's blogging, essentially. It's finding ways to get people to your site who wouldn't be there. The easiest way to do this is to go and make sure your Google My Business account is set up correctly. Because what people do is they look locally first. Yeah. Insurance near me, right? Yep. And what's going to
defaults to that.
And it will,
or like it pops up when you're like insurance, it goes near me.
It will pop up that the business listing is on the right side of Google there. On your main results, you're going to have a bunch of listing services, right? You can also get, that's the next thing. That's those affiliation things you can sign up for and get put on those listing websites. They work fine. The more money you give them, the higher you're going to rank. So again, you're getting into a pay game. Google My Business, what they're looking for is, do you have photos? Are you updating your hours regularly when you're out? Do you have all your services listed? Do you have comments? And that's soliciting comments from your people. And things, and connecting all your other social accounts, everything through there. And then you're going to rank higher and higher. So it's keeping it up to date. And that's the number one way, I'd say, to just get right to the top of those search engine rankings. And then the other side, you start getting into sponsorships and advertising. And again, you're talking money. But those are kind of just the foundational ways. And then the next ways are, what do you do once somebody hits your site? Like, it's one thing to drive them there, but if your site doesn't produce anything, or they aren't signing up for something, how do you tailor your site to give the content that they want to read, or to actually really trigger them to hit, yes, let's talk, and it's tweaking it that way.
How do you think about that from a marketing lens? Like that to me goes into like client or prospect experience, right? Of how do they engage with us? What do they see? What do they read at each stage of the game? And I want to be clear, that could involve a salesperson too. Mm-hmm. It's very important that we are thoughtful with thinking about that entire experience from the first day that they hear about us through, they're reaching out or we are reaching out to them to close of sale, right? And every step in between. But how do you think about that lens from a client prospect experience? What are you asking yourself as you go through, making sure it's connected, cohesive?
First thing is if you don't have an effective contact us form on your site that's going to create leads right there on the middle, the very first homepage you see, like, you're missing out. That's going to be the most effective way to bring it in. Once you're starting to do gated resources and content and things like that, those people might not be ready to they're not necessarily raising their hand saying, yes, sign me up for a policy, or let's talk. They're saying, hey, that was valuable to me. But there's triggers you can look for beyond that. Hey, this came in, like for us, we have benefits, we have safety, we have various impact areas that we call them, that we use through launch that bring these people in. So when they come in through a benefits resource, I now know, hey, this goes to our benefits people. Yes. Make sure they're interested. If it's a current client who's looking at our benefit stuff, I can see that through our CRM and assign that out to our risk advisor and say, hey, they were looking at this type of content on our site. Next time you sit down with them, you should bring this up. And just finding ways like that. And it all goes back through launch, where you have those evaluation processes of seeing, oh, okay, here's your impact areas, here's how they're connected, and here's how they can really see that holistic approach. Yeah.
And those are great ways too. The gated resources is the thing I picked out of there. I mean, essentially, what you're trying to do with a lot of that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you build things that are valuable to your target market audience, that solve problems for them, right? And then when you mean by gated is they have to give you some form of email or whatever. You don't ask for much. Don't make it painful. All you want is some way to contact them, know who they are. They're electing, by getting that resource, they're electing to be engaged with you, essentially, from a marketing perspective. But the biggest thing there is you can start to learn, for this particular target client, you have now one more piece of the puzzle. They found this valuable, as you mentioned, right? So, they downloaded the return to work program document or whatever. How to build a return to work program. Well, now, they might be having issues with work comp. They're trying to solve it, and, they don't have somebody to go to solve that, right? So now, you could start sending them work comp related information. Maybe if you reach out directly to them at some point, that, hey, I saw you downloaded this. Like, what about this? Have you thought about doing, an occupational health clinic relationship? So those can be very impactful ways to start to build that profile of that target market client, but do it in a valuable way.
And honestly, automate it. You have to automate as much of this stuff as possible.
Yeah.
And it works at a smaller firm to, hey, new lead comes in, let's reach out to them with what they're downloading, what they're looking at. But in mass, that becomes very tedious. And it's not repeatable. You have to build these automations in place. Again, that takes a CRM and things like that.
Yeah.
And as you're thinking about those topics for, like we were talking about gated resources and things like that, it really comes down to understanding your target audience so well. And a great example I'd give you is, let's say you're looking for personal alliance clients, and okay, we want home and we want audit, we want packages. You might not write something on home and auto insurance, but that if somebody owns a boat or an RV, chances are they also own a house and a car, right? So you might be creating resources around that, knowing if we get them here, we can get them here too.
Yeah.
And it's a great, last week we had a great prospect come through, and it was a blog we wrote on umbrella coverage, business umbrella coverage. And it was like, well, I know if a business is big enough to want to start looking at larger umbrella policies, here's probably what they're Googling. And then there's all of this back here too on the insurance side, and potentially for us, the other impact areas that we do. And so we write that blog, right?
Yep.
It doesn't rank highly at first. Over time, it's grown. And then boom, someone came to the blog, clicked on the resource available to that, downloaded that, reached out then on the contact form, was like, I need to talk to somebody about this. And now that's an extreme example, but that's that flow that you're looking for with creating content that attracts the right audience, that then eventually leads to them raising their hand, right?
Yep. Well, a great way to do this is to listen for questions that your clients consistently ask you, right? So a great one is, how much, what should my limit be on my umbrella or
100%.
excess policies, right? We get those questions all the time. So write a blog on that topic, because if they're asking you, they're probably researching it online at some point in time, or other people are.
Yeah. I wasn't going to give away all my beautiful keywords that I'm going for, but that's fine. Just give it to them.
Yeah. But, Marcus Sheridan, I think it was, wrote a great book on this. They ask, you answer. That's the concept. Obviously, he goes into a lot more detail, but, make the list of every question you get from a client, figure out which ones are getting asked regularly, and just go answer those. Ryan Hanley does this absolutely masterfully. And it's a great way to drive that inbound traffic. But I also want to get your perspective on the inbound versus outbound. So it's like everything you hear is marketing, you're trying to drive inbound leads, and if you're not getting inbound leads and all this stuff, you're doing it wrong, and blah, blah, blah. Which definitely, if you can drive inbound leads, great, more power to you. But I'm a firm believer, a lot of people listening are, targeting business owners that, small to medium-sized businesses may not be they're just not the type of folks that are going to reach out inbound and say, hey, I'm going to raise my hand for insurance unless something is really wrong. So there you have to have that approach of, you're still doing similar activity, but it's to warm the prospect up for that outbound communication that has to come at some point. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody to get to the point of getting inbound leads seems so daunting and so big that you don't start, Right. And I think you need to be cognizant that it's not necessarily getting to the point where every one of your leads is coming inbound.
It should never be that way.
Yeah, 100%. So talk through, give your thoughts around that.
It's what we talked about at the beginning. Brand awareness is the foundation of everything, right?
Yeah.
And it's some ways you're going to do that, especially when you talk about local business owners or things like that. Obviously, just doing advertising, and this doesn't have to be big ad spends, right? It's doing some little YouTube ad that you just put $50 a week behind,
Yeah.
or whatever their minimum is, and just seeing what produces there. But if anything, it's just you can target better, so you know you're targeting at least close to your audience, or you're looking at more mass media spends, TV ad, radio ads, things like that that are sponsoring a podcast, things like that. They're just who that match your audience. The other side of that can be referrals and partnering, doing partner marketing with other companies with similar interests, realtors, or it depends who you're trying to serve. But finding someone with the same audience as you, pairing up and doing marketing with them, whether it's webinars, whether it's holding events, things like that. And then it's looking at the marketing funnel as a whole and understanding there's brand awareness, then there's going to be some engagement, some traffic to your website. Then it's how do they become a lead. Then it's how do you get them to an event. Then it's how do you talk to them. There's all of that. But if without brand awareness, no one's moving down your funnel. And then when our RAs, our risk advisors, go out to call these people or show up at their businesses or do cold calling or anything or show up to these events, it's hopefully with the understanding in the future that these people are going to know who we are, and they're going to respect what we do because we've gotten that message out there. So it's definitely a mix. I like to call it hunting and gathering. There's a lot of agencies that, man, they're just out there hunting every single day, and it's exhausting. It's hard. You go through ups and downs, and so it's you got to do that, and then you got to plant this orchard back here that's always producing fruit that are those incoming leads.
That's good. Yeah.
And so you have to have both to have a balanced diet, right? But you got to. I'm getting a little too deep into the metaphor here,
good analogy,
but that's my point. Is how do you do both without favoring one or the other or putting all your eggs in one basket?
Yeah. Well, and I think too, being cognizant of your prospects are going to research you, whether you're doing outbound or inbound, right? I mean, even if a salesperson calls and leaves a voicemail, if they're somewhat intrigued, they're going to Google you first, right?
Yep.
And so being very cognizant of that messaging that's out there and what they're going to find. I encourage everybody to Google your name and your business name. You might be surprised at what comes up. You never know. But those are always good exercises to do around what are they hearing when they're looking for you. But you mentioned one in there that I want to talk about that, again, I don't know if people think about it in the lens of marketing, but events.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a big proponent of events. I think it's a great way to get multiple people in hearing your message at one time. They're not easy to do. There's complexities to doing them. But it could also be webinars. When I say events, it doesn't have to be in person, right? It could be a variety of different things. But you mentioned it as part of the broader prospect or client experience. So talk through how, you think about events and how you get people to events, et cetera.
Yeah. For me, events, I've always traditionally liked them as closers. As we're finally going to get in front of them in person.
This person's been engaged with us for a little while.
They've been engaged, yes. And then eventually they say, yes, I'll come to this event. It's content that I know already impacts them because I've looked at that history of what they've came in on and done. Yeah. And I know, hey, this type of content brings in more traffic and more interest than others. So let's hold an event or a webinar on that. And so I think of it that way. Now, it doesn't have to be that. Like I said, if you're partnering with someone else with that same audience, a lot of it's going to be, cool, we'll invite some of our clients, you invite some of yours. And that changes a little bit because then you're going to get the introduction for the first time there as opposed to closing there.
Yeah.
So it can really be across the board with how you use events, but they are effective. I mean, you get them in person and that's how you build that trust, right? Is when they actually meet you, they see your expertise. That's the biggest thing. So they're going to trust your expertise. They're going to trust you as a person. Hopefully you have some good discussions after that. So use them. Again, they can be a lot of work, but they don't have to be crazy. I mean,
don't go overboard.
Yeah, you don't need to go rent out the hotel suite down the block, and you
can.
Yeah,
go
hey,
for it, but
lunch at our place. We're going to be talking about this topic. Come if you can. We'll serve lunch. Have a drink. Yeah, it can be that simple. It's just the hardest part of events is if you don't have a list to invite to the event. And that's where I say bottom of funnel, because if you're just posting it on social media and hoping people sign up, they're probably not unless they're already engaged clients of yours that follow you. So how do you get that out there And that's through all that time you're spending building that email list, through that gated content, through building SEO onto your website, get people there, get their information, then you're going to start inviting them to things.
Oh, I love that. And I think one of my big takeaways from that is not any one thing, but it's the consistency of doing the right activity over time. I hear so often in the industry of and I want to be clear, cold calling's not dead. It's still very effective, works. But it seems like everybody gets to this point where they want to make one phone call and they want to have the verbiage right and they want to know how to overcome the objection and get this person to get a meeting, And it drives me nuts because it sometimes might take 3 years of calling that prospect and talking to them and building a relationship. It's still a cold call, but you're building a relationship over time with that client so that they know when you call next year, in a month, or in 6 months, they know who you are, they know what you do, and the conversation is different, right? And the same thing goes for all of these particular things. It's not one thing that's going to get that client to say, I want to do business with you, right? It's typically going to be the 15th time you've hit them with something that now they're going to say, you know what, Cam, I respect what you guys do. I have this issue. Can you guys help me? Right?
Exactly. And another piece in there with that is that power of that follow-up. Because what's the number one answer you're going to get? Is either, oh, I'm not interested at this time, or why don't you hit me up in a few weeks? Or why don't you send something over to my email? I'll take a look, right?
Love that one.
Which is always a thing. But if you don't have anything great to send them, what are you going to say? Hey, here's a repeat. I want your business. You have to have some sort of piece to send them. We have our guidebook here we're using, and things like that, where those should be refined and you should be well thought out and repeatable. Not necessarily, you want to customize it to them, of course, because you just talked to them. They said to send it over, even though they're probably just going to ignore it. Yeah. You want, get their attention, right? At least they know now who you are and why they're receiving it, which is more than you can say with a lot of cold outreach. So 100%. Anyway, but yes, you're right. It's persistence, and sometimes the power's in numbers if you're making those calls. Now, on the marketing side, you're more, like I said, it's more inbound. You want people to come to you. Where sales, you have to go find it, but you need the materials there to make that happen too.
Well, yeah, and that's true, but you want to go find those that already know you if possible. Right? Or know something about you.
Right.
And so that's where that entire process and experience is super important. It still does need to be done, and plenty of salespeople focus on cold calls solely. And again, it can work. It's a numbers game, it's volume. But if you're calling a subset of people that already know who you are, your likelihood of getting higher conversion numbers goes through the roof. Mm-hmm. But going back to sending stuff to the client, right? I think it's important, it's at some stages throughout the sales process with a prospect is lead with value. Give them value throughout that process so that, they can understand that you're an expert. They feel like you've given them enough value that at some point they, are going to reciprocate by giving you an opportunity. But you can't give away the farm. You can't give away everything. So how do you balance that in marketing, right?
Yeah. Well, this is the beauty of having kind of that two-pronged, that sales approach and that marketing approach happening simultaneously. Let's say a lead comes into our site and they are interested in group benefits. I'm not going to make the sale. My job is to keep building that brand awareness and keep providing value on the marketing side. So my next email to them is, hey, did you know, here's this blog on captive insurance programs if you're interested in that route. Next email is going to be, oh, hey, by the way, did you know that your ancillary benefits, if you do them this way, it might be a little more beneficial. It's just going down the list and value. Every time they click on that link, guess what? I'm tracking it. So I know the score. I know how many times they've clicked on it. Boom, they click on a third link. I'm sending an alert to my risk advisor saying, hey, they're interested. You need to give them a call. And then when they call, the conversation's a lot different. It's, hey, I know you've been considering captive insurance programs, and we're something that we've been thinking about here, how we can work together on that. You have 15 minutes for a quick discussion. That's a lot different than, hey, are you looking at benefits? Because we know they are. We've seen it in their actions. So that's where that two-pronged approach comes in, and just that tracking and making sure you know the value you're providing. Provide value first on the marketing side.
How do you look at, so I totally agree with that. how do you look at that tracking piece and then the reach outs at certain times, as far as some people, where I'm going with, some people try to hide that they know because they don't want the client thinking I'm tracking them or whatever. Versus, I think it's important you're just up front. I think everybody nowadays knows like all that shit's tracked and whatever. Right. But it's not weird to me, at least, when you get a call, like when you've been interested in something, and if it's been valuable content, if somebody reaches out to me, like says, hey, I know that you've been interested in these things, like through the emails that we've been sending, I wanted to follow up and make sure that, or ask you if it would be worth a 15-minute phone call that we could talk through what else we do for you, whatever. How do you view that, though? Because I know that people look at that in two different lenses.
Man, I'll tell you, 99% of the time, I'm telling you transparency first.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, they're going to be impressed that you have a marketing capability strong enough to track what they're doing and know what they're clicking on and know what they're interested in. Yeah. And I say that because it does. It adds some credibility if you're able to do that stuff. It's like, maybe they aren't the small shop I thought they were. Like, maybe
that's true.
Like, hey, they are carrying some weight. So there's something to that. Yeah. The other side is, it shows that we're actually caring about what they're interested in, right?
I agree.
If you're just blindly throwing darts, I don't know.
Get annoyed fast.
Yeah. But if you know you need to hit 20-20, go hit it. Like,
well, that's true. You got on analogies.
I'm a marketing guy.
Marketing guy. Yeah. So So we've worked the client all the way through this process, right? Mm-hmm. How do you think about, from the marketing angle, the close? Right, because I know, again, a lot of times that can be viewed as that's the salesperson.
Yeah, and it's their fault if we lose it every time.
100%.
It's never my fault.
Right.
So, no.
I know. That is not the way that I work.
No, it is not.
Just messing with you. But how do you, tell me what goes through your mind as you're thinking about that. Again, this is all one big process, right? How do you connect and look at it from the marketing lens when you're actually going through either the sale or the presentation, however you want to look at it, when you're asking for that business?
Sure. So there's twofold to that, right? Number one is our brand. Up front, we were very clear with our brand, and everything we do in our brand is reflected. Mm-hmm. So when that transition happens, where it goes from marketing to, hey, RA, I need you to reach out, it should be the same story.
Yeah.
All the way down. We've known they've engaged with it this far. Now let's have the actual verbal discussion about it.
That's where you can drop off big time with a prospect.
100%. Yeah. If you're not all on the same page with what that story is that you're telling, then they're going to start hearing something completely different than what the marketing people told them, and you're going to lose it.
Yeah.
So that's the first part. The next part is being able to equip a sales team, not just with the materials and the story, but really the resources to make it possible. And for us in our CRM, there's a lot of ways that we're doing that and automating some of that stuff. But even just when you sit down with them, you need to put something in front of them, physical. And what are you doing there? And so launch is a big part of that for us, with being able to pull up the tech and show them exactly where they're ranking in things and measuring their risk scores across the board and doing our card exercise that ties to that to see what's most important to them. All of that still ties back to our story in so many ways, right? So the brand, it's a continuation all the way through. And it shouldn't matter which risk advisor's on the account. We have 15 or so here. That shouldn't matter. Yeah. The story should stay the same. It's just what the client needs is going to change.
Yep.
But that should always fit into the broader story.
100%. You should be able to, if they've gotten to that point, you should know what the client needs, so you can just tailor that piece of it. But I absolutely agree with you that the story should be consistent the entire way through,
right?
So that they don't feel there's anything disjointed. But what else from your perspective? I mean, you've been in the financial services side of the arena, now coming over to the risk management, more heavily focused risk management, risk advisory side of the industry. We've been here almost 2 years. We talked about what else have we not talked about that you see as either big opportunities for our industry that we're not capitalizing on, or things that we might be missing?
There's a few. I think trust is a big one. I think insurance isn't the first industry you think of when you think of trust, and I want to work with them.
Especially right now. Hard
right.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're as bad as used car salesman or anything, but
nothing against used car salesmen out there.
in an industry where a lot of times you're thinking of the insurance guy not necessarily as, oh yeah, the high stand-up person. Like, there's a lot of ad agencies out there who are slinging products, right?
100%.
So how do you set yourself apart and build that trust? And that's I think is a big thing, just through everything you do, through your brand, through your marketing, and then through that sales process, is establishing your expertise and showing them like, no, we're here for your best interests. Because that, coming from financial services, honestly, we would market the crap against insurance. If you were an insurance shop that also did oh man, we were going to just destroy it because we were the high and mighty.
Yeah.
Financial services is the second least trusted after car salesman and politician, or third least after politicians and used car. But that it was in that space, right? It's understanding how do you show your value and actually earn that trust.
Yeah.
And so whenever you're thinking about marketing, it's not just about the product. It's about the outcome and making sure you can sell that and be trusted to do that.
Yeah. Well, I love that word trust. I think it's such an important piece of that. Earning trust from a client or prospect can be one of the best and fastest ways to winning the business. If they trust you, they like you, you're going to have a much better opportunity to at least win that business. Right. Well, dude, I think we're coming up on time here. What do you want to leave with anybody as far as marketing? I mean, there's so much that goes through my head around, we've already talked about, but just our industry focusing more on that message that we're getting out versus just, picking up the phone and dialing, which is certainly something we need to do, but putting a lot more thought behind it, right?
I'd say pick one thing for right now.
That's great advice.
Pick one thing that you're going to do very, very well for the next 6 months and focus on it and just keep building it and building it. And some options there could be, I'm going to blog based on SEO research for my area and use a free tool like Uber Suggest, or you can do a paid tool like SEMrush. They're going to tell you, here's keywords people are Googling in your area and related to your industry. Start looking at that stuff. I'm going to write a blog every week for 6 months on this topic, and then I'm going to check my website traffic and see if it's gone up. Yep. Or
don't even look until that point. Yeah.
Or this week I'm going to just 100% focus on LinkedIn outreach. And you're going to add people on LinkedIn who are a match with you, and you're going to just keep doing that. You're going to message the ones that you think would be a great fit. And even if you don't message them, maybe you're just going to post something to LinkedIn every day relevant to your target market. You're going to add someone every day from that target market. Just keep doing that every single day.
Yep.
Spend 6 months focusing on one thing.
Love
and
that
just
advice.
and see and if after 6 months you don't feel like there's a path forward there, pick a different thing.
Yep.
It could be as simple as if you don't have the time to do stuff, maybe it's as simple as hire an ad agency and say, okay, I need you to do, let's just run one campaign. And one campaign, it's going to be small, but measure the results, see if it's worth putting that $1 in if you're getting $2 out, right?
Yep.
And then scale from there.
Well, the beautiful thing with, marketing in general, but in today's day and age is it's not like that investment goes away, right? So if you're putting out good, valuable content, you may not have hit on the exact right channel for what you're doing, but all of that content is there, can be reused, and is going to be leveraged moving forward. So
100%.
Biggest thing is start, pick a lane, and get going.
Yeah. Yep. Honestly, if it's post on social media every day, that's still something. I'm not 100%. saying, I know I gave the whole social media and might not be the most fruitful, but it is fruitful if it's every day and you're focused on it.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for taking the time. This was a blast. I think everybody got some good stuff out of it.
Yeah. Really enjoyed being on the show. Thanks for having me.
Catch you everybody next week.
See ya.
See ya.